friend. And this friend was a small child, a lot of fears, a lot of phobias, raging case of ADHD. But as a 9-year-old boy, he was at that point where, fear and fun get mashed together, and the thrill is everything. And so, this meant for him that every new animal he saw was met with the question of, ooh, what would that do to me? Steve, Kathy, what would that do to me? And we're like, okay, why are you focused on what danger you would face from this animal in the wild? But he kept asking the question, and that the curious part of his heart and soul was obsessed with this. Now, knowing this child as we did, Kathy and I didn't want to ignite his fears and phobias again, didn't want to make him unable to function. And so we retreated to that trope, that animal in nature would be more scared of you than you are of it. And that didn't really satisfy him because he kept asking the questions. And under our breaths, for Kathy and for myself and for Cooper, we started having these little grumbles to make each other laugh every time he would ask the question. And so, ooh, a camel, what would that do to me? And one of us would mumble, it'll spit in your eye. A hippo, what'll that do to me? It'll sit on you. A boa constrictor, a Burmese python, what'll they do to me? They'll give you a great big hug. And finally, we got down to the Canadian Pavilion. And who here has been to the zoo? Everybody knows what's down in the Canadian Pavilion, right? The grizzly bear. 9 feet long, 700 pounds of teeth, claws, and fur lumbering around inside his enclosure. And we get the question, Steve, Kathy, what would that do to me? And I think it was actually Cooper who couldn't help himself anymore. Cooper was about 12 at the point. And he looked at him and he said, it'll eat you in one bite and it'll spit out your skull when it burps. And Keenan's face went white and his eyes went wide and he pushed his face up against the glass and he went, cool. He wanted to see a dangerous animal. He had seen a dangerous animal. I don't remember being asked the question much for the rest of the day. But curiosity is one of those things. God gave it to humanity when He gave us free choice. And it's both an amazing blessing and it's one of Satan's great entry points into our lives. And we ask things like, what would it be like if? What if I did this? How does this feel? What does that do? I remember seeing an odd segment of an animated movie one time where this scientist had created something while he was sleepwalking. As I say, it was a cartoon. But he created this thing while he was sleepwalking, and he was looking at it in the morning, and he says, I don't know what it does, but it has a button on it. And I want to push the button, and I want to find out, but I'm afraid to. And that was one of those things. Guys, if you ever want to test the curiosity of a guy, just tell him something has a button on it, and that it does something if you push it. And guys, don't lie. If it has a button on it, you may say you don't want to push it. You may tell everybody that you don't want to push it, but if there was nobody around and nobody watching, and you were there and it had a button, you'd want to push it. And God help you if there's another guy with you. He'll coach you. Come on, push the button. Go ahead, push the button. No, I don't want to push it. You push the button. You push it. Okay, no. We'll both push the button together. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So curiosity. It's one of mankind's greatest strengths as well as one of our greatest weaknesses. We want to know what will happen. And how good or how bad could it be? The real problems come when we don't know what will happen, but we do it anyway. Or worse, when we do know what will happen or what might happen, and we do it anyway. Sometimes the results are amazing and wonderful. I mean, how many advances or experiences in medicine or engineering or art or literature or cooking or life in general have come about because someone said, what if I do this? I mean, who got curious enough about the lobster to say, I wonder how that tastes? Enough so to decide that they needed to figure out how to cook it. Throw it live in salted boiling water and then have butter on the side for dipping. Who figured that out? Why did they figure that out? But curiosity like that has led to some really interesting and really tasty things to eat. But curiosity can also lead to horrible and disastrous things. Adding a new twist to a pesticide, for example, ended up creating a chemical weapon. Beautiful fireworks could be used to blow up buildings and the people inside them. And when someone asked, I wonder if it's possible to split an atom to create energy, well, we know how that turned out. Sure, we have nuclear power plants providing amazing amounts of electricity around the world, but we also know that there are 15,000 nuclear warheads out there, and that 2 of them, basically firecrackers compared to what we have now, were used on cities almost 72 years ago. Curiosity, what will happen? It can lead to both good and evil. So let's go back to the Garden of Eden for a few minutes. Eve was tempted, we are told, to taste the fruit of the tree at the center of the Garden of Eden. It looked good. Perhaps it felt pleasant to the touch. Maybe it had a smell that was pleasing to the nose. But God had said, do not touch it, or you will surely die. Now, I've often wondered if this actually led Adam and Eve to the question of, what is die? Because according to the narrative that we have, there is no record of anything dying in Eden. For one thing, no carnivores are named. No grizzly bears or lions. No hawks on the wing stooping to catch, kill, and eat. No mice or rodents or smaller birds scurrying for their lives. The warning to Adam and Eve is not tempered by experience or observation as far as we can tell. No sense of, I don't like that. I don't want that to happen to me. What is die? Reading it later, any reader has no doubts as to what death is. But for Adam and Eve, according to the narrative, it's a curiosity. Maybe not something to be experienced, but perhaps, just perhaps, understood. And then there's the serpent right there saying, try it. You will become like God, in that you will know the difference between good and evil. And we talk almost every week in church about how we want to be more like God, how we want to grow closer to God, how we want to know the difference between good and evil so that we can choose the good and avoid the evil. How can this possibly have been a bad thing for Eve and Adam? Because they were told not to do it. Now, God might have explained this out a little further. Taste of the tree, God might have said, and you will know good from evil. Taste of the tree, God might have said, and your innocence will fade. You will see your wrong decisions for what they are, and you will feel guilt, and you will feel shame. And your soul will weaken, and your eyes will turn inward, and your heart will become concerned with things that benefit you alone. No, God might have said, leave the fruit alone. Stay here with me, knowing that you are loved, loving each other and loving me in return. Leave the fruit alone and trust me. But they didn't. And God didn't explain it that way. Now, there are many who struggle with the first few chapters of Genesis. They say, is it truth? Is it parable? Did it really happen that way? I tend to work on the premise that God gave us these stories for a reason. And if we have questions about their veracity, He'll answer them in due time, probably right before we come to the foot of His throne, and it no longer matters. The lessons, however, can still inform the lives of all readers. And the lesson here is that sin came about by human choice. God wanted us to listen, follow, obey for our own benefit. And yet the very curiosity that He gave us, the very intellect that He gifted us with, and that allows us to grasp His presence in the world, it has the potential to lead us astray. And it does lead us astray. It's not the curiosity. Curiosity itself is not a sin, but curiosity leads to temptation, and giving in to the temptation is where sin is committed. So try this. Put yourself in the story. Ladies, you're Eve. Men, you're Adam. And pretend that you were there in the garden with the tree and the serpent. And the question is, would I eat that fruit? And the answer I'd submit to you is yes. For myself, knowing myself as I do, maybe it wouldn't be the first time I thought of it, or maybe not the second time, maybe not the 10th time the serpent brought it up, or even the 100th or the 1000th time I thought of it, or that it was suggested. But eventually, perhaps thinking that God wasn't watching at a certain moment in time, kind of like with something with a button, I'd have done it. I'd have wanted to know. I'd have wanted to see, to feel, to taste. And in doing so, I would have disobeyed my God. I would have sinned. And I would have fallen. We are a fallen people. Fallen from grace, fallen from glory, fallen from the pure presence of God. Remember where Paul says, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death came through sin, and so death spread to all because all have sinned. Paul lays the taint of sin at Adam's feet, not Eve's, you might notice, for whatever that's worth. His argument is that one man brought sin into the world, and one other man paid its price for the sake of those who were touched by it. We who are curious, we who are tempted, we who come to the various crossroads of our lives, to the various decisions, and yes, to the various temptations that come before us moment by moment, we may choose the right or the left, the way of God or the way that benefits only us, the way of grace or the way of sin, the way of good or the way of evil. Even with Christ in our lives, we may still choose to ignore Him and go our own way. And to paraphrase Paul elsewhere, there it is not me that sins, not the me that I want to be, but it is the sin that is alive within me. Nevertheless, if Christ is in our lives, we can rejoice in the fact that He is the one who will come and guide us back to the proper road. For He knows the true way, and He never strayed from it. He never took the easy path, but the hard road of obedience to God. He was never quiet when a situation called Him to speak words of truth and justice, and He never spoke in words of blustery self-justification when a quiet, brief lesson was all that was required. He was tempted, but never gave in. He was tested and never broke. He died and He was glorified. He loved us and He opened the way for us. Now we know the difference between good and evil, between righteousness and sin. We all make decisions, say words, go places, do things, and live by times for ourselves and ourselves only. And worst of all, we generally know when we're doing good and when we are not. It hurts to admit it. We are embarrassed by it. And when we are found out, we often try to run and hide. There's no hiding from God. Nothing He does not see, nothing He does not know, and nothing He cannot or will not forgive. Remember the words of the psalmist that we heard. When I kept silence, my body wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was dried up as by the heat of summer. Then I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not hide my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. Let us think about these things as we prepare to come to the table of grace. And at this point in our service, I will simply say, Amen.